Imagine for a moment. You just left another manifestation workshop. It's 11 at night and you're in your car in the empty parking lot. In your hands, a new notebook full of exercises you just completed. Wish list. Wheel of life. Letter to the universe. You paid $100 to spend the entire day learning to raise your vibration and attract the reality you desire. And this is the 4th workshop in the last 8 months. You already made a vision board hanging in your room. You already memorized affirmations you repeat while driving to work. You already have 3 guided meditation apps installed. You follow 17 manifestation coach profiles on Instagram. And you really genuinely believe in all this. But when you look at your real life, what do you see? The same job that exhausts you. The same relationship that leaves you empty. The same bank account that makes you anxious. Nothing changed. Absolutely nothing. And while you're sitting in that cold parking lot holding that new notebook, a cruel question begins whispering in your mind. What's wrong with me? Why did everyone in the workshop seem so excited and I just feel more lost? Maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe my energy is blocked. Maybe I need another course, another book, another technique. And you start the car and drive home promising to try more, believe more, visualize more. But beneath this promise, there's a deep tiredness. The tiredness of someone running in circles pretending they're progressing. Now imagine a radically different scene. You also want to transform your life. But instead of going to another workshop, you stay home on a Friday night. You cancel your plans and sit alone with a question you've been avoiding for years. Why every time something good is about to happen in my life do I run? And instead of covering this question with positive affirmations, you let the memories come. That important project you abandoned in the final week. That incredible person who showed interest and you simply stopped responding. That promotion you didn't apply for even being qualified. And as you write these patterns, something begins emerging. A belief buried so deep you never saw it consciously. Good things don't last. Not for people like me. And you ask when you learn this. And a memory surfaces. You were 9 years old. Your family was finally stable. And then everything collapsed at once. Divorce. Moving. Loss. And that 9-year-old child concluded. It's safer not to have good things because when you have them, the fall is more painful. Better to stay mediocre. Better not to rise so you don't fall. And for 20 years, this belief operated silently, making you unconsciously sabotage every opportunity for real joy. And when you finally see this, when you finally name this shadow, something inside you loosens. You don't try to convince it it's wrong. You validate. You say it makes sense you concluded this. A child seeing that would naturally arrive at this conclusion. Thank you for trying to protect me from more pain. And then you negotiate. What if we could try again but this time differently? And as you integrate this scared part, you stop automatically running from what's good. Not because you convinced yourself, but because you healed. The difference between these two approaches isn't semantic. It's fundamental. One tries to overwrite the unconscious with conscious positive thinking. The other integrates the unconscious by bringing it to consciousness. And today I'm going to show you exactly why one works and the other fails, what the fatal error 90% of people make when trying to manifest is, and what Carl Jung discovered about real transformation that law of attraction gurus don't want you to know. Especially when we get to the part about psychic compensation, you'll understand why positive affirmations can actually worsen your situation instead of improving it. Before continuing, I need to tell you something important. I tried law of attraction for years. I read The Secret 3 times. I made vision boards. I visualized. I affirmed. I maintained gratitude. I did absolutely everything. And you know what changed? Almost nothing. Except I felt increasingly worse about myself. Because the law of attraction narrative is cruel when it doesn't work. It says if it's not working, it's your fault. Your frequency is low. You have blocks. You don't truly believe. So besides not getting what you want, you also get an extra dose of self-criticism. And I accepted this for years. Until I found Jung. And Jung said something that completely exploded my understanding. He said the psyche functions through compensation. That the unconscious always compensates one-sidedness of consciousness. And that the more you force conscious positivity, the more the unconscious compensates with negativity to create balance. And suddenly everything made sense. My affirmations weren't failing because I was doing them wrong. They were failing because they were creating more internal resistance by trying to suppress parts of me that had legitimate reasons to doubt. So let me explain what most law of attraction teachers don't understand about how the psyche really works. Jung discovered through decades of clinical work that the human mind isn't a blank slate you can reprogram with positive thoughts. It's a complex system with multiple layers, many of which are unconscious. And these unconscious layers aren't passive. They're active. They have their own agendas. They have their own beliefs. And they were formed through real experiences you lived. So when you had childhood experiences that taught you being ambitious is dangerous, a part of you recorded this deeply. And that part won't simply disappear because you repeated 1,000 times that you're ambitious and successful. Actually, that part will resist even more. Because from its perspective, you're trying to put yourself in danger. And it will sabotage in ways you can't consciously see. You'll undercharge without noticing. You'll avoid opportunities without clear reason. You'll self-sabotage at crucial moments. And all this happens on autopilot. Because shadow operates below consciousness. And here's the fatal error practically everyone makes. They treat the shadow as enemy. They try to defeat it with positivity. They try to suffocate it with affirmations. They try to ignore it with forced gratitude. And Jung discovered this is exactly the opposite of what works. Because the shadow isn't your enemy. It's a part of you that was exiled. And exiled parts don't disappear. They become stronger. They gain more power over you the more you reject them. Jung called this the compensation effect. And he explained it like this. If you consciously try to be 100% positive, your unconscious will compensate by being increasingly negative to create balance. If you consciously completely deny your fears, your unconscious will amplify these fears until you're forced to look at them. The psyche seeks wholeness, not one-sidedness. And law of attraction preaches extreme one-sidedness. Only positive thoughts. Only high vibrations. Only gratitude. And this sounds good on the surface. But psychologically it's disaster. Because you're creating an inflated persona consciously while pushing more and more material into the shadow. And eventually the shadow explodes. It erupts in ways you can't control. Anxiety. Depression. Massive self-sabotage. Complete collapse of results you were trying to manifest. Now let me give you a concrete example of how this works in practice. Imagine someone who wants to manifest loving relationship. She does her affirmations. I am worthy of love. I attract perfect partner. She visualizes ideal relationship. She feels the emotions. She maintains high vibration. And she truly believes she's doing everything right. But what she doesn't know is there's a shadow operating. A part of her that was deeply wounded in past relationships. A part that concluded intimacy is dangerous. That vulnerability leads to pain. That it's safer to stay alone. And this part won't simply surrender because consciousness is affirming the opposite. This part will sabotage. It will make this person choose emotionally unavailable partners. It will create fights at moments of greatest connection. It will find flaws in anyone who gets too close. And all this happens unconsciously. The person swears she wants relationship. Consciously she does. But unconsciously, the shadow is protecting her from repeating past pain by rejecting any possibility of real intimacy. And no amount of positive affirmation will change this. Because you're not addressing the root problem. You're trying to cover a deep wound with positivity band-aid. Shadow integration works differently. Completely differently. Instead of trying to suppress the part that fears relationship, you dialogue with it. You ask why it's afraid. You listen to the reasons. And often these reasons are legitimate based on real experiences. Maybe you were betrayed. Maybe you were abandoned. Maybe you were abused. And a part of you made the logical decision at that moment. Never again. It's safer alone. And this part is trying to protect you. It's not villain. It's protector. And when you recognize this, when you validate this part instead of trying to eliminate it, something profound shifts. You create internal alliance instead of internal war. And then you can negotiate. You can say to this protective part, I understand why you're afraid. And I'm grateful you're trying to protect me. But what if we could try again differently? What if we could enter relationship but with better boundaries? What if we could be vulnerable but also protect ourselves adequately? Are you willing to experiment with me? And when you do this honestly, consistently, for weeks and months, resistance dissolves. Not because you suppressed it, but because you integrated it. The protective part still exists, but now it works with you instead of against you. And relationships begin flowing naturally. Not because you manifested with positive thinking, but because you removed the internal block that was sabotaging. And here's the truth the law of attraction industry doesn't want to admit. When law of attraction works, it's not because positive thinking created reality. It's because the person didn't have significant unconscious blocks in that specific area. If you grew up in an environment where money flowed naturally and you never developed limiting beliefs about prosperity, then yes, visualizing and affirming will work easily. Not because you're attracting money with vibration, but because you don't have shadow blocking. You're internally aligned. So conscious action translates into external result without resistance. But for 90% of people, there are blocks. There are shadows. There are unconscious parts with conflicting beliefs. And for these people, who are the vast majority, law of attraction doesn't just fail. It worsens the situation. Because it adds more repression on top of existing repression. It creates more dissociation. It amplifies the distance between conscious persona and unconscious shadow. And eventually this tension becomes unsustainable. So let me give you now the exact protocol of how shadow integration works in a way you can apply. First step. Stop trying to manifest for 2 weeks. Completely. No affirmations. No visualizations. No vision board. Nothing. Because you need to stop adding more conscious material to be able to hear what the unconscious is saying. And in the first days without your manifestation ritual, pay attention to what emerges. Often it's anxiety. It's doubt. It's fear. And these aren't signs you're failing. They're signs the shadow finally has space to express itself. Second step. Identify the specific area where manifestation isn't working. Don't be vague. Be brutally specific. Money? What aspect of money? Relationship? What aspect of relationship? Health? Career? Be precise. Third step. Ask the golden question. What part of me doesn't want me to achieve this? And wait. Don't force intellectual answer. Let the answer emerge from the unconscious. And often what emerges is surprising. Maybe you discover a part of you doesn't want financial success because it associates money with losing authenticity. Maybe you discover a part of you doesn't want relationship because it associates intimacy with losing freedom. Whatever emerges, don't judge. Just acknowledge. Fourth step. Validate that part. This is crucial. You won't argue with it. You won't try to convince it it's wrong. You'll recognize it has reasons for its beliefs. You'll say out loud or write, I see you're afraid that if I achieve X, Y will happen. And this fear makes sense based on Z experience we had. Thank you for trying to protect me. Fifth step. Negotiate. You propose an experiment. You say, what if we try to achieve X but in a way that keeps us safe from Y? What if we grow financially but maintain our values? What if we enter relationship but maintain our autonomy? Are you willing to try? And when you do this genuinely, resistance begins dissolving. Sixth step. Minimum experimental action. You won't try to manifest the final result immediately. You'll do the smallest possible action toward your goal that your shadow can tolerate. If it's money, maybe it's raising price by 10% for one client. If it's relationship, maybe it's accepting coffee with someone. If it's career, maybe it's applying for a slightly better position. The action needs to be small enough not to activate shadow panic but significant enough to prove growth is possible without catastrophe. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. You collect evidence. Evidence that the shadow's belief was outdated. You charge more and don't become a horrible person. You open emotionally and aren't destroyed. You grow professionally and don't lose your essence. And this accumulated evidence is infinitely more powerful than 1,000 affirmations. Because you're not trying to convince your shadow intellectually. You're showing experientially that it can relax vigilance. And gradually, over months, shadow stops blocking. Not because you defeated it, but because you integrated it. It becomes ally instead of opponent. And when this happens, you no longer need to manifest. Things simply flow. Not magically, but naturally, because you're internally aligned. Consciousness and unconscious working together. And this internal alignment translates into external result inevitably. Not because universe is responding to your vibration, but because you stopped sabotaging yourself. Now let me anticipate the obvious objection. But I know people for whom law of attraction worked. They manifested incredible things. How do you explain that? And my answer is in two parts. First part. Some manifestations are statistical coincidence. If millions of people are trying to manifest things, some will succeed by pure probability. And these are the stories that spread. The millions who failed stay silent because they're ashamed thinking it's their fault. So you have massive survivorship bias. You only hear about successes. Second part. When law of attraction genuinely works, it's because the person was already internally aligned. They didn't have significant shadows blocking in that area. So positive thinking worked not because it created reality, but because there was no internal obstacle. Conscious action translated into external result directly. And in these cases, shadow integration and law of attraction arrive at the same place. But shadow integration works also when there are blocks. Law of attraction only works when there aren't. So which is universally applicable? And there's an even deeper aspect of this Jung explored extensively. He discovered that often what you want consciously isn't what you need deeply. Your consciousness wants new car, big house, perfect relationship. But yourself, your deepest wholeness, might be wanting something completely different. Maybe growth that only comes through difficulty. Maybe transformation that requires loss. Maybe individuation that demands you abandon certain superficial ambitions to pursue deeper calling. And when there's this discrepancy between conscious ego and unconscious self, no amount of manifestation will work. Because you're trying to force ego in one direction while self is pulling you in another. And self always wins eventually. Because it's more powerful. It's deeper. It's your true you. And law of attraction completely ignores this dimension. It assumes what ego wants is what you should pursue. But Jung would say often ego is completely wrong about what will bring you real fulfillment. And that the path of individuation often requires you to let go of what ego wants to embrace what self needs. Shadow integration honors this complexity. It doesn't assume conscious desire is automatically legitimate. It investigates. It asks, does this desire come from ego or self? Does this goal serve my wholeness or my persona? Do I genuinely want this or do I want it because society says I should want it? And often what you discover through this process is you were chasing goals that weren't truly yours. You were trying to manifest the life other people approve instead of the life your soul desires. And when you stop doing that, when you align with yourself instead of your ego, a profound peace arises. You might not get the things you thought you wanted, but you get something infinitely more valuable. You get to live your real life instead of performative life. And this doesn't come from affirmation. This comes from integration. From bringing unconscious to consciousness. From making conscious what was unconscious. Which was the final goal of all Jungian work. So here's what I propose. For 3 months, try shadow integration approach instead of law of attraction. Use the 6-step protocol I gave. Do it honestly. And at the end of these 3 months, compare. Do you feel more integrated or more dissociated? Do you have more internal peace or more anxiety? Have your external results genuinely improved or are you just trying to convince yourself? And if at the end of 3 months shadow integration didn't work better, you can return to law of attraction. But I guarantee if you do the work honestly, you won't want to return. Because you'll have discovered something positive affirmations never gave you. Truth about yourself. And truth about yourself is the only solid foundation for real transformation. Everything else is quicksand. Seems stable on surface but sinks when you put real weight. Let me tell you something personal that summarizes all this. When I was trying law of attraction, I lied to myself constantly. I said I was grateful when I was frustrated. I said I believed when I was full of doubt. I smiled when I wanted to cry. And I thought this was spirituality. That this was growth. But it was dissociation. It was repression. It was denial. And when I started shadow integration, the first thing that happened was I had to admit truth. That I was poor. That I was alone. That I was lost. And admitting this hurt. Hurt a lot. But it was surgery pain instead of infection pain. It was pain leading to healing. And as I integrated my shadows, as I stopped lying to myself, something extraordinary happened. I started living in reality instead of fantasy. And living in reality, however harsh, is the only place real transformation happens. Fantasy is comfortable, but it's sterile. Reality is uncomfortable, but it's fertile. And I choose fertility. I choose real growth. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because pain is often the sign you're touching something real. So I want to leave you with a final question. Do you want to feel good, or do you want to truly grow? Because the law of attraction promises you can have both, that you can feel good all the time and get everything you want. But Jung would say that's a lie. Real growth requires confronting the shadow. Real transformation requires crossing darkness. Real individuation requires dying to who you thought you were so you can be born as who you really are. And this process isn't always pleasant. Often it's brutal, but it's real. And real is what matters. If you made it to this point in the video, it means you're ready for real. That's why I created the Shadow Integration Protocol, a 5-step process to transform chronic failure. It's a practical framework you can use to work with the exact patterns we talked about today, instead of fighting them or suppressing them. You'll find the link to the PDF in the description. So subscribe to the Shadow Dialogue channel. Leave a comment telling me which approach resonated more with you. And if you want to see the complete walkthrough of how I personally tripled my income through shadow integration, I have a full video breaking down the entire process, and it will appear on your screen now. I'll see you there. And remember, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a spiritual guru. This content is educational, based on my personal experience studying and applying Jung. Do your own research. Trust your own experience. And never, never, let anyone, including me, tell you what truth is for you. Discover it for yourself.
If this resonated with you, subscribe to the Shadow Dialogue and hit that like button. Your transformation starts with one click. See you in the next video.